This is Transfer Talk. Moises Caicedo's move to Chelsea is getting closer after weeks of negotiations. Mauricio Pochettino looks like he'll be getting his man in what will be a British transfer record fee. We'll also have developments surrounding the future of Southampton midfielder Romeo Lavia. Will he end up at Liverpool or Chelsea? Big news this lunchtime. Neymar's time at PSG is up. He's off to Saudi Arabian club Al-Hilal. Plus, West Ham have one new signing today. Could Harry Maguire be the next through the door? Plenty to talk about right now. Very good afternoon to everyone at home, and to Dave Reed, Olivia Bazaglo, Kwaku Afari, and to European football expert Kevin Hatchard, who join us in the studio. Right, let's get started with Moises Caicedo. He's currently at Chelsea's training ground. He's going to be having a medical ahead of completing a record fee, a British record fee of £115 million from Brighton to Chelsea. Dave, just give us all the details on this one.
I'm sure he's very excited to be finally at the Chelsea training ground, Moises Caicedo, having that medical. It's going to be £100 million paid by Chelsea with an extra £15 million in add-ons. We're told a significant chunk of those add-ons, it's felt, are achievable as well. The contract is going to be 8 years, plus the option of a 1-year extension for 12 months. Remember, Brighton bought Caicedo in 2021, £4.5 million, and 2 years later, 2 and a bit years later, they're selling him for up to £115 million. The best flip of a player I can remember.
Well, Kevin, let's talk about the fee then. We've all been saying how good a player Moises Caicedo is, but the fee is a big talking point. What do you think about it?
This is what Chelsea are doing. They're paying big fees, betting on the future, effectively, because they're amortising these deals over a long period of time. They're clearly confident that these young guys they're bringing in are going to be successful in the long run. We're only really going to get a bit of pushback if you get a situation where not necessarily Caicedo, but other young players they've brought in for big fees on long contracts, if they get to a couple of years in and they're not playing and they want to leave, it might be quite difficult to shift them out if you've got them on big wages on long contracts. But in terms of Caicedo himself, I think you've got a potential partnership there with Enzo Fernandez, because I think the energy Caicedo has, I think it's going to allow Enzo Fernandez to dictate games. So it's exciting from Chelsea's point of view in the now. What happens down the track, I guess we'll find out.
But where does he fit into the Chelsea midfield, Olivia?
As Kevin says, he slots right in next to Enzo Fernandez, probably a little bit behind Enzo Fernandez, just to allow Enzo and whoever plays in that other midfield role to flourish. We saw how brilliant Enzo was against Liverpool without having a proper defensive midfielder there. Of course, Caicedo hasn't played much recently. I know he played in a couple of games in the summer series, but he missed Brighton's last pre-season friendly. And he, of course, missed the Premier League game against Luton as well. But knowing him, he's fit as a fiddle. He runs around non-stop constantly. So really wouldn't surprise me if all goes to plan and he passes his medical and he's announced today as a new Chelsea player. Really wouldn't surprise me if we see him alongside Enzo against West Ham. Chelsea don't play until 4:30 on Sunday, of course, live on Sky Sports as well. So that'll be very exciting. We could maybe see his first appearance in a Chelsea shirt this weekend.
And you would be very happy about that.
I would be very happy.
Would Caicedo come into that Chelsea midfielder? Would it make them the best midfield in the Premier League?
I'd love to sit here and say it would, but it just wouldn't. If you look at...
It's close. It's not close. It's close.
It's not, though, because if you look at Man City's midfield and you've got Rodri and you've got Kevin De Bruyne, the trophies between them two, and then you're either putting in Bernardo Silva or Kovacic, obviously they've signed from us. They've got a way stronger midfield than Chelsea. And then you look at Arsenal. I look at Arsenal midfield, and especially if you move Kai Havertz to a false nine or you kind of take him out of that, Thomas Partey, Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard is an incredible midfield. It's got the legs, it's got the drive, it's got the energy, it's got the guile as well. I obviously love the idea of Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, but we haven't seen it in practice yet.
Yeah, we haven't. We definitely haven't. I think that's going to be interesting. But also, has that Partey, Rice, Odegaard midfield clicked either, really? Because we watched it in pre-season and Arteta, even Havertz dropping in there, says he wasn't sure where to play Havertz, if it's going to be in that midfield. Were they that convincing against Nottingham Forest, the midfield?
Partey was right back against Forest, wasn't
yeah,
he?
so it's...
But the point here is it's not about what it is now. It's about what it could be. And that, I think, is the idea. You have Pochettino. We know he can develop young talent. And that's what they want to do. The problem, I think, potentially, is patience. Chelsea fans are going to have to be patient. Were they patient with Graham Potter? I would suggest they weren't. And so you need that patience in the short term because this isn't going to click immediately.
Well, there are more developments today because Liverpool have agreed a deal with Southampton for Romeo Lavia. However, Chelsea are still pushing to sign him and are close to an agreement. Sources have told us that the total package agreed between Liverpool and Southampton is worth £60 million. Olivia, surely Chelsea aren't going to do this to Liverpool again for another midfielder in the space of a few days.
Nothing surprises me with this football club anymore. I think Liverpool are probably sick of the sight of Chelsea for this transfer window. I think when you look at the game yesterday, it was obvious that I think Liverpool needed a defensive midfielder perhaps more than Chelsea did. I look at Chelsea's midfield options now in Enzo Fernandez. You've got Andre Santos. You've got Conor Gallagher, who I thought was really impressive yesterday, adding Caicedo to that as well. I'm not sure that Chelsea need Romeo Lavia as well, especially only playing once a week this season, on the odd exception of a couple of League Cup and FA Cup games midweek. I just think those four in midfield, I know you could maybe look at Lavia coming in and that maybe mean Conor Gallagher going out, and that could be an option. But I watched Conor Gallagher yesterday and I was really, really impressed with his game all round. It's one of the best performances I've thought for Chelsea. We know what Romeo Lavia brings. He's a brilliant player. He's raw at 19. But I think that Liverpool need him more than Chelsea. And I just think, what do Liverpool do if this happens again? What position does that leave Liverpool in? Because they're almost desperate for a defensive midfielder now.
I think it does alleviate the pressure, though, because he is 19 years old. Let's not forget that. He goes into Liverpool and he starts every game for them. They are in desperate need of a DM. Whereas he goes to Chelsea and maybe his minutes aren't, he can kind of load his minutes. He doesn't have to play as many minutes as he would do at Liverpool. So I can understand the attraction of playing for Chelsea. It just, like you say, the amount of money Chelsea paid for Caicedo and now going in for Lavia wouldn't really make sense on the face of it. But I could understand the move for the player because going to Chelsea means that maybe there's not as much pressure as there would be at Liverpool.
I'm not sure a player chooses Chelsea to have less pressure. Yeah. These are elite athletes at the top level. Romeo Lavia will back himself to go into Liverpool, play every game and be a success. I'm not sure a player chooses a move for less pressure. But I understand your point.
Yeah. Do you agree that Liverpool need him more than Chelsea?
Probably do now they didn't get Caicedo. I think what's changed here, is the way Liverpool do business, because in years gone by, they would make moves that weren't really trailed. I mean, the Szoboszlai thing caught Leipzig on the hop, for example. Normally, that's the kind of deal they would do when they brought in Diogo Jota. I don't remember a huge amount of buzz about that before it happened. Fabinho, not many people saw that coming when they first brought him in. Now it seems all very public, and there seem to be a lot of leaks around what they're doing. But I do think they could do with a specialist defensive midfielder. I don't think he would play every game, actually. I think Jurgen Klopp is flexible. He will rotate things. They've got a lot of midfield talent in the club already. There's no doubt about that. It'd be interesting to see where McAllister plays in the long run. But I think Lavia would be a good signing.
Well, Chelsea goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga is in Madrid, finalising his move from Chelsea to Real Madrid. Deal is a straight loan, and he has been having a medical. So Kepa to Real Madrid, does that make sense, Kevin?
Yeah, I think it does. They were linked with him before he went to Chelsea, when he was an up-and-coming goalkeeper at Athletic Club. And I think if you look at it compared to De Gea, for example, they know they can make a short-term move for Kepa. Thibaut Courtois out with this ACL injury. He's going to be out for at least 6 months. Kepa can come in, do a solid job. Whereas David De Gea, he's not going to come in for 1 year. You're going to have to commit a fair bit of finance to get him on a multi-year deal. You don't have to do that with Kepa. You could just bring him in on a short-term loan and see what happens. And then when Courtois comes back, he's the number one again.
Yeah, the Kepa deal is now done, as we reported earlier on. But some news just into us, and this will potentially please West Ham fans, because they've made initial inquiry to Ajax over midfielder Mohamed Kudus. West Ham are doing their due diligence on a number of players just in case Lucas Paqueta leaves the club. We're told, though, 4 other Premier League clubs, including Brighton, are interested in Kudus. Kevin, tell us more about him and what he would bring to West Ham.
Really exciting, really instinctive, attacking midfielder, but can play in a kind of false nine role, if you like. We saw him score that brilliant goal at Anfield against Liverpool in the Champions League, got a stunner against Rangers in that competition last season as well. And somebody who I think, if he went to West Ham, could give them a bit of an X factor, a bit of unpredictability in those attacking areas. He's not quite a straight swap for Paqueta. Paqueta would play a bit deeper, drive from those areas. But I think if they could get Kudus, that would be a really good move for them. It's interesting, Brighton have been linked with him for a long, long time. You get the sense he's been keeping his options open.
Right. Well, Neymar is off to Saudi Arabia. A deal's been agreed with Al-Hilal to sign a 2-year deal. Sources say that Paris Saint-Germain is set to receive up to £86.3 million for a player that cost them a world record £200 million from Barcelona in 2017. It's understood he will earn £129.4 million per year, which is 6 times his PSG contract. Right, Kevin, not just the figures here, but what do you make of this deal of Neymar going out there in the first place?
I think the first thing is this is a massive boost for Paris. I know that might seem weird because they're getting rid of one of the most recognisable players in the world, but they've been trying to shift him on for quite some time. It gets him off the wage bill. It gets them a transfer fee. And what it does is it takes a bit of the heat off them in terms of the fans, because if you remember towards the back end of last season, the Ultras and others were protesting against how things were going at Paris, this Galactico era and what it had become. And some of the fans, and we cannot condone this at all, but some of the fans went to Neymar's house and effectively said, get out. Now, Neymar had said earlier in the summer that even though he wasn't loved by the Paris fans, his intention was to stay. But I think he's realising that he's surplus to requirements in Paris, and this is a good move for him personally. But in terms of his career, that's more of an open question.
The end of the Galactico era now then at Paris Saint-Germain?
Yeah, I think this signals the changing of the guard, and I think it's significant for Kylian Mbappe as well, because the feeling was that Mbappe wants to be top dog. He's unquestionably that now that Messi is gone, Neymar is gone. And there is this big push at all levels of Paris Saint-Germain to show the Ultras, to show the fans in general, we are serious about not bowing to player power. This is going to be about club first, player second. And this is another move towards that strategy.
And Quaker, do you think he's going out to Saudi Arabia a little bit too early? He could still be top dog at a top European club.
100%. I remember watching YouTube videos of this mythical teenager playing at Santos, and he was the prince that was promised. He was supposed to be the heir apparent to Ronaldinho, the successor to Messi and Ronaldo, and he's 31 years old and he's going to play in Saudi Arabia. No disrespect to the Saudi Arabian League, but he's 31 years old. When Messi and Ronaldo were 31 years old, they were in the midst of winning Ballon d'Ors and Champions Leagues. And based on the talent of Neymar, he should still be doing that. Obviously, it's not gone right for him at PSG, but somebody who averages 18 league games over a 6-year period at PSG, that's surely underwhelming. He hasn't justified the £200 million price tag. And I know I've sounded very harshly. This is a man who scored a lot of goals and is Brazil's joint top goal scorer. But it's been underwhelming from Neymar. And this move to Saudi Arabia, personally, I see it as underwhelming. It's sad for a player who had so much potential, despite the fact that he did achieve a lot.
This really annoys me, Neymar going to Saudi Arabia, because, like Kwaku says, when you think of him with Messi and Suarez and how good he was in terms of probably the third best player in the world at some points, and just the raw talent of he's up there, and he's just never really reached his potential. And it's like, you know, it's mad that he's going to Saudi Arabia and that other clubs perhaps aren't interested because of maybe everything else that comes with him. But I was so gutted when he made that move to PSG in the first place, because I just thought, staying at Barcelona, I think an extra 3 years with Messi, you know, I was thinking maybe Ballon d'Or levels for Neymar, but he's just never reached it.
But this is why he went. He went to Paris to win the Ballon d'Or. He went to Paris to win the Champions League, and it didn't happen for him. He came close in 2020. But Bayern beat them in the final, and you could see he was devastated by that. He was in tears in that final in Lisbon. And ultimately, he's been one of the poster boys for that era that hasn't really moved Paris forward as a club. And I feel a little bit sorry for him in a way, because he's had a lot of injury problems. And he's a guy that invites a lot of contact. He's quite brave on the ball. You know, he knows he's going to get whacked. It happens time and time again, but he gets up and he takes it. So we don't know what the Saudi League's going to be in the fullness of time. So, you know, maybe it will become a really strong league and he'll be a big part of that. But I think he knows deep down this hasn't worked for him.
You think about the market where Neymar might go. It feels like top-level European clubs now are a lot more about the collective rather than the individuals, as perhaps they were maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Does Neymar want to go to another European club and have to put in the work and maybe not get the star treatment that he maybe has had over the last 5, 10 years of his career? So I think when you think about a market, maybe Saudi is the market for him to go and be a star attraction there and maybe not have to get down and dirty in another European league and have to play under a coach who wants to make him do things that he's not perhaps used to doing.
I think it's a sad, sad end, because it does feel like it's perhaps coming to an end, his career.
But also teams can't afford him.
Yeah.
In years gone by, what would have happened was he'd have gone to one of the Italian clubs probably, and, you know, a Milan would have come out or a Juventus would have come out and said, great, we'll bring him in. That can't happen now. They just don't have the funds to do that.
Yeah. What's this about Roberto Mancini joining him in Saudi Arabia?
So Mancini has resigned from his position as the Italian coach, and it's being widely reported that he has an offer from Saudi Arabia to manage their national team. They had Hervé Renard in charge, who did a good job at the World Cup, masterminded that win over the eventual winners, Argentina. He's moved on to the French women's national team. He was at the Women's World Cup recently. And so Roberto Mancini's being very strongly linked with that job. And I think it's interesting because he's had a mixed picture. He'll always get credit in the bank for winning the Euros, but they didn't qualify for the World Cup, which is a major blow. They haven't played particularly well in the qualifiers either. I wonder if he's looking at it and thinking this is a good time to get out.
Well, still to come, will Manchester United sign Sofian Amrabat? Plus, West Ham do sign James Ward-Prowse. We'll discuss that and more in a few minutes. Stuff, Kevin. Now, Fulham are close to finalising a deal with Chelsea to sign forward Callum Hudson-Odoi. We're told there's a broad agreement on many aspects of the transfer and cautious optimism that a deal can be finalised this week. So Callum Hudson-Odoi from Chelsea to Fulham is close. Harry Maguire remains in talks over his exit from Manchester United. Once completed, he'll be given permission to take a medical with West Ham United. A deal worth £30 million has been agreed between the club's personal terms, not expected to be a problem. Right, Dave, how important is this move for Maguire's England future?
Yeah, look, I think it is very key. I mean, he's been told, we reported this earlier in the summer, he's been told by Gareth Southgate that he needs to be playing regularly if he's going to be able to keep his place in the England team for the European Championships. From Harry Maguire's point of view, I think he's also, not only is he in danger of running out of loyalty from Gareth Southgate, but I think there's other younger centre-backs that are chasing him hard and perhaps have already overtaken him. When you look at Levi Colwill, when you look at Mark Gay, unfortunately Tyrone Mings has got himself injured, but he's been playing the best football of his career under Unai Emery and definitely would have been in with a shout of the England squad. So I think it's vital for Harry Maguire's England international future. And Gareth Southgate has said on the record as well that, you know, players need to be playing regularly in order for him to select them in the squad. You have to remember his England career as well. His England record is actually very good. He was in the Euros team of the tournament in 2021. He made our Sky Sports team of the World Cup late last year as well. So there's undoubted quality, and he has achieved and he has performed at a high level for England in major tournaments. So he does have that under his belt. But I think there will come a time when Gareth Southgate will have to say to him, look, you need to play.
Kevin, I want to know how he's viewed around Europe, outside England, because sometimes in England, over the past couple of years, I think Harry Maguire, it's been bordering on bullying, some of the abuse that he's taken from, you know, fans, let's say, and actually certain parts of the media as well. And I think it's been very, very unfair. But that's over here. How is he viewed around Europe? Is he seen as an elite centre-back? He's playing centre-back for England, who have done very well in major tournaments recently. I
think there is a respect for what he's done for England, absolutely, and the performances that he's put in. And England, of course, have done so well in major tournaments under Gareth Southgate, and he's been a big part of that. But I think what's interesting is how seldom he is linked with major clubs in Europe. It just doesn't happen. And so, you know, a team like Bayern, for example, who have often looked to England or to the Premier League to see who they might bring in. They're very rarely linked with him. Barcelona or Real Madrid, he's never really consistently been linked with them. So I think that does tell you something, that those really big hitters around Europe very rarely linked with him in his career.
Well, if Maguire does leave, Manchester United are ready to accelerate talks with Bayern Munich for Benjamin Pavard. Initial contact has been made, but no formal offer. They're also looking at Nice defender Jean-Claire Todibo. Those two, Kevin, which one is best suited to Manchester United? Because the fans last week when we were talking about Todibo got quite excited about him.
Yeah, Todibo is a player who's kind of rebuilt his career to some extent, because he went to Barcelona far too early, couldn't get a regular place, had a loan spell at Schalke, that didn't work out. They were a club in flux and he wasn't really able to perform for them. He's been able to rebuild his career in Liga. All of the quality is there. I mean, he's a fighter anyway, because people didn't think he was going to be a player at all, because he had a car accident when he was very young. When he had his leg was really, really damaged, so he had to fight just to be a professional footballer in the first place. I would go for Pavard personally, simply because Pavard has the track record. He's been at Bayern for a long time now. He's played in a lot of big games. He's a World Cup winner. He's a Champions League winner. Can play centre-back, can play right-back. Really solid defender. He's OK on the ball, but in terms of the defensive part of it, very, very good.
Kev, in terms of Pavard's link to Manchester United, is it the fact that he is multifaceted the reason why they're going for him? Because you see it with other big clubs in the world in terms of them targeting, like Vardiol, for example, can play multiple positions. You look at Ake, Kanji. Is his ability to play multiple positions the main reason why Manchester United are targeting him?
Well, I think there's a pragmatic element to it as well, because he's only got a year left. Okay. And I think people are aware of that, clubs are aware of that, and he's made it clear to Bayern he's not really interested in signing a new contract. He wants a new challenge. And so I think there'll be a number of clubs looking at him. Manchester City will link with him as well.
Why are they wanting to centre back? Is it purely because Maguire might be leaving, Olivia?
Yeah, I think so. Maguire's obviously on his way out. They've obviously got Victor Lindelof, Alessandro Martinez, but Rafael Varane, obviously, we know how good he is on his day, but he missed 17 games the season before last, and he missed 15 games last season. And, Manchester United are perhaps one injury away from being in trouble in that position. Eric Bailly might still go out, might still leave this summer as well. So, yeah, I think they are slightly light in that position. And I just think Pavard, like you say, can play both positions. I think the versatility is the reason Manchester United would go for him.
Well, Real Sociedad remain in talks with Manchester United over the signing of Donny van der Beek. Deal under discussion is a loan with an option to buy, but former club Ajax are also understood to be interested, and Manchester United will assess if they can push on with a deal to sign Fiorentina midfielder Sofian Amrabat, or whether it will require further departures, and that's after Fred left the club, of course, so maybe there will be space for Amrabat. Dave, in terms of Manchester United's business so far, we've given them a lot of praise this summer. They've had a lot of praise from the outside as well. How impressive has their business been?
I mean, yeah, when you look at it, they've achieved the objectives that they wanted to in terms of incomings, haven't they? They wanted, eventually they've moved on David De Gea, and they've got in Andre Onana, who will provide a different profile of goalkeeper to David De Gea, and someone who I think will really benefit them this season and in the long term. They needed central midfield, someone who is also good at set-piece deliveries, because Manchester United were poor at set-pieces, attacking set-pieces last season. Mason Mount offers them that. He also offers them a point of difference out of possession. They needed a striker, and they've managed to bring in Højlund. Now, some Manchester United fans will say, well, we paid the money for Højlund and we didn't go out and sign Harry Kane when he was available for only a little bit, smidgen more money. But I think we were talking on the programme a couple of weeks ago, and I think I gave Man United's window a kind of 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. And I think people were asking me, well, why have you only given them a 7 or 8 when they've signed all the players they needed to sign? And it was simply because of outgoings. Manchester United needed to move players on that weren't going to be a part of their development and weren't going to be a part of their long-term plans. Now, Fred has left. They've brought in some money for him. Anthony Elanga has left. They've brought in some money for him. But there's still players there that United can and maybe need to move on. We've already mentioned about Harry Maguire. And there's other players there that other clubs are interested in. Maybe Scott McTominay might go out. Dean Henderson is another one that they can bring in money for. So if they manage to get those players out that they need to, then I think that score probably goes up.
And if Amrabat does come in, Kevin, whereabouts in the midfield would he fit?
He's primarily a defensive midfielder, but he's got that ability on the ball to stretch the play, to spray passes around. We've seen that. But it is his work without the ball that is the most impressive thing. We saw that for Morocco in the World Cup. We've seen it for Fiorentina as well, because Vincenzo Italiano plays a front foot style. Amrabat's asked to fight a lot of fires, and he's very able to do that. I think just picking up the point about United's transfer business in general, feels a lot less chaotic this time around, a lot less scattergun. Feels like they've identified players that can really transform the first team, and they've gone out and got them.
Right, on the way, could Kieran Tierney be on his way out of Arsenal? We'll tell you about that and Everton's latest signing. To Arsenal, they've got a full agreement for the signing of goalkeeper David Raya from Brentford. He's had his medical and will sign on loan for £3 million, but Arsenal have the option to make it permanent for £27 million, or 30 in total. Now, a number of clubs are keeping an eye on Arsenal left-back Kieran Tierney's situation. Real Sociedad are thought to be interested. Tierney was left out of the Arsenal squad for Saturday's victory over Nottingham Forest. Tierney has 3 years left on his contract. Right, Dave, why is Tierney available?
The short and simple answer is that he's not playing enough. And 27 appearances in the Premier League last season, only 6 came as starts. And he's fallen behind Alexander Zinchenko when he was signed, and now Jurrien Timber, Takehiro Tomiyasu can also cover in those positions. Timber has obviously started at left back. Now, he got injured against Nottingham Forest and was taken off in the second half. Arsenal currently assessing that situation. He was replaced by Tomiyasu. So those are the only kind of things that I might end up working against Kieran Tierney in this transfer window. This injury to Jurrien Timber. Don't forget as well, Zinchenko has missed a chunk of pre-season and the start of this season because of injury as well. So it's only that situation that might hold up Kieran Tierney's. But the simple answer is he's just not played enough.
Kevin, I believe that Kieran Tierney is absolutely brilliant. I rate him very, very highly. What do you think?
I've always really liked him. I think at Celtic we saw the player he can be when he's bombing on, when he's adding to the attacking side of the game. It's just whether tactically he's quite suited to what Arteta wants to do. I think he's a bit different to the guys Dave was mentioning, guys like Zinchenko. But for somebody who can get the best out of him, he's maybe a bit more of a straightforward fullback, a bit more of an old school fullback in some ways. I think he could be a really good player for somebody.
Right, we've actually got some breaking news. It's coming to us right this second, actually. In fact, let me get it. Oh, very, very quick, this breaking news. When it comes to Moises Caicedo, we've been telling you he's been having his medical at Chelsea. That medical is now complete. So we've been saying that over the next day or so, maybe even later today, we should get an announcement that Chelsea have signed Moises Caicedo. That is getting ever closer because he has just completed his medical at Chelsea. Right, more on that as we get it. But James Ward-Prowse has completed his £30 million move from Southampton to West Ham. He has signed a 4-year deal and will wear the number 7 shirt. This is what he's had to say about his move.
I think there are a few options, but it's no secret that obviously David Beckham was a huge idol for me growing up. And I think of a number 7 as a winger, but I thought, why not take a step into that number 7 shirt, and not so I'm going to play on the wing, by the way, but just
just to clarify that now.
Hopefully try and emulate the sort of David Beckham stuff I wanted to do as a kid. So why not?
Well, emulate him. You're so close to overtaking him in the all-time list of Premier League free kicks. I think he's on 18, you're on 17.
Yeah, it's close. I mean, he was my idol growing up. He was the one that I'd go and copy in the garden, and I'm sure I've got loads of kids' tops with number 7 on it from mine in the past. So, it just kind of felt right, and there we are.
So James Ward-Prowse is West Ham's new number 7. Olivia, how important can he be for his new club?
I think it's a brilliant signing. I think when you look at West Ham's squad in terms of last season when they were in the Europa Conference League, obviously I know they went on to win it, but they did struggle in the Premier League for quite a long time. They were in a relegation battle. I know they got out of it by the end of it, but they were coming into this season playing in the Europa League this season, a much harder competition, having lost their best player in Declan Rice, but also off the pitch, you lost a lot with Declan Rice. I actually think James Ward-Prowse is very similar in terms of leadership qualities he brings. Listen, we all know what that man can do with the ball at his feet. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And I think in terms of those qualities, he offers so much to West Ham. But goals as well, goals from midfield that West Ham perhaps might not have always had. They might be losing Paqueta as well. He's Premier League proven. I just think he's an absolutely solid signing. And I think he's going to be brilliant for West Ham. I really do.
Let's talk about Paqueta, because Manchester City are still pushing to sign the West Ham midfielder. West Ham don't want to sell, but they are aware of Paqueta's desire to make the move. West Ham have thought to value him in the region of £85 million. Reminder, we told you earlier that West Ham made an initial inquiry to Ajax over midfielder Mohamed Kudus. Kevin, with the Paqueta deal, last week this took us all by surprise when we heard about Manchester City's interest. Did it take you by surprise?
Yeah, it did, but I think he's the kind of player that Pep Guardiola loves because he has that technical ability, has that ability to affect the game in different ways. It was interesting listening to David Moyes about what they wanted from Paqueta when he first arrived, because he saw him very much as a 10, somebody who get goals, get assists. But actually, if you look at what he did for Brazil at international level, it was from a deeper position. I think we've known about his talent for a long time. He probably went to Milan a little early, and that didn't work out. I think there's a lot of people at Milan who regret him moving on, kind of rehabilitated his reputation at Lyon. But I'm fascinated to see if Pep Guardiola can work with him, what Lucas Paqueta can become, because I think the raw material is there.
Where would he fit in that case, to the Manchester City midfield?
He'll fill the void left by Gundogan. They're very different players. Gundogan was just his beautiful functionality with a nose for goal. And Paqueta did show during his time in Lyon that he can score goals and he can be effective in the final third. Maybe less so for West Ham last season and definitely less so for Brazil, but he can just do everything in midfield. He's got that eye for flair as well. He loves a nutmeg. So I feel like he's going to bring a lot to this Man City team in terms of personality, in terms of bringing that human level to it. Because you look at Man City and they are a great team, but they are a very, very functional team. I think Paqueta brings something a bit different, and it's not similar to Jack Grealish because they're very different profiles of players. But I think sometimes you do make signings for other reasons apart from on the pitch. Of course, on the pitch, he will be an incredible play for Man City, but I think he brings something else off the pitch as well.
Dave, if you look at the West Ham's transfer business over the last few years, I know this summer it's taken them a while to get the players in that they want, but they are signing quality. You can see that with Declan Rice, they held out for the fee they wanted, that they got. Paqueta, if he goes, will go for much more than they bought him for. You think of how well Soufal has been, given how little they paid for him. Souček's been a brilliant signing as well. Jared Bowen has been amazing for them. West Ham actually do deserve a lot of credit for the past few windows. They've not all been right, I know that, but those ones, a lot of examples.
Yeah, I mean it's a good hit list, isn't it, from David Moyes? There was a point maybe 18 months ago where you could have listed off all the players and thought, well, there's not been a dud. I think some West Ham fans might have a couple of other players in mind when they think about their transfer business now that perhaps haven't gone as well as they would have hoped, but yes, they have had a good record and they have had good fees. I don't think David Moyes will countenance really the sale of Lucas Paqueta in this window. He would not want to lose two of his stellar names in this transfer window in Declan Rice and Paqueta. It would have to be a huge offer from Manchester City for even West Ham to get round the table on that one.
Yeah, how much does it help with the recruitment when you've got a manager who's actually been there, a little bit of longevity, and that manager builds their squad? It surely must be easier in a transfer window rather than starting from scratch when you come in July.
Yeah, the thing with Moyes, it's going to sound really weird this because I'm going to compare him to Simeone at Atletico Madrid, but the reason I would do that, every time they try and progress a little bit in terms of the style, there's always that safety blanket, there's always that willingness to then take a little step back. And I think if you look at what Simeone has done, things like Joao Felix coming in, that was never really going to work. If you look at West Ham, they have had some hits, there's no question about that. But when you look at, they couldn't get Allaire to work, they couldn't get Scamacca to work, because the temptation was always go back to what Mikel Antonio could bring to the side, for example. So I think they're in a really interesting place. How do they progress the team? And you look at the signings they've made, you know, Ward-Prowse going in, linked with Maguire, linked with McTominay, they're all kind of safer bets that fit in with what Moyes wants to do. So it's then how do you progress that going forward?
Right, well, Everton have completed a loan deal for Leeds winger Jack Harrison. There's a release clause which can be invoked during the loan spell, and Harrison, he is currently out injured for between 3 and 4 weeks, and an outgoing potentially at Everton is Mason Holgate. Southampton are after him. They're looking at a loan. Everton would prefer a permanent deal. Now, next, we've got a list of names that we'll be discussing with Kevin, including João Cancelo, Nicolo Zaniolo and Jeremy Doku. A reminder of the breaking transfer news this hour. In the last few moments, Moises Caicedo has completed his medical ahead of his £115 million move from Brighton to Chelsea. Right, while we've got Kevin Hatchard here, our European football expert, we've got 7 topics to get through in this final part of Transfer Talk. Let's start with Harry Kane's debut, which I believe you were commentating on. Talk us through it.
It was a disaster, quite frankly. They extended the registration deadline so he could play, and they named him on the bench. And they played Leipzig, and by the time he came on in the Super Cup on home soil, they were 2-0 down. And he wasn't able to make an impact. He barely saw the ball. He got a standing ovation when he came on, and it was interesting when he came out of the tunnel before the game. I think he was quite overwhelmed by the kind of reaction he got. He had Serge Gnabry next to him, joking that it was for him, not for Harry Kane. But, you know, that is not the way they wanted to start. Thomas Tuchel was furious after that game. The Bayern coach said, Harry will have thought we haven't trained for 4 weeks, because that was nothing like what we've been doing in pre-season. So, a bit of a false start, let's say.
Are you surprised he didn't start? Because he's been fit. He's been playing in every single one of Spurs' pre-season games right up to the start of the season. So it felt like the perfect introduction to have him leading the line for their Super Cup game.
Yeah, it was a bad mistake. Yeah. It was, because we knew he was fit, as you say, scoring goals, playing games. You've gone to all the effort of bringing him in. You've got him registered.
For that game as well, yeah.
Yeah, and they started Mathys Tel, who I like very much, but he's only 18. Missed a couple of big chances. Sadly, got a lot of social media abuse afterwards, actually, which you never want to see. And, you know, it just starts them on the wrong foot, because basically they've had their pants pulled down at home by one of their big rivals for the title. It's a dreadful way to start.
Yeah.
Well, what about Verratti's future then? Is he on the move?
It looks that way. He's certainly not part of Luis Enrique's plans. That's been made clear to him and in public. He's been linked with a move to Saudi, but Saudi clubs haven't got to the level that Paris wants at this stage. But it's all coming up Paris financially at the moment, because you've got this situation where they've been able to shift out Neymar. If they can shift Verratti for big money, it just helps them with FFP, gives them a freer hand, and maybe they can move for somebody like Rondel Colomouani and have a really strong strike force ahead of the new season.
You said it's all come up Paris in terms of finances, but is it not another indictment of the PSG kind of project? Is Verratti, I remember when he was coming through, he was touted as one of the great hopes in terms of centre midfielders, and he has achieved a lot at PSG, but hasn't maybe hit the heights that we would have expected. Would you say that his time at PSG would be judged as a success?
Look, they didn't win the Champions League. That's the basic measure that you're looking at with Paris. He's had injury problems, so he can't get away from that. That's hampered him. But I think he's played a lot of good football in Paris, and they did get to a Champions League final. It's funny, isn't it? Because if that final goes a different way and they beat Bayern, we're looking at Paris's era with a totally different lens.
Yeah. And what about, I mean, I've wanted to see Victor Osimhen in the Premier League for the past year or so. Looking unlikely that he's going anywhere this summer.
Yeah, and I think that could be a really big boost for Napoli, because they've been very quiet in the transfer market. They lost Kim to Bayern. They activated his release clause, and he was happy to go there, which shows where Bayern are in the European pecking order and where Napoli still are. He was linked with a move to Saudi, as they were casting around for a big star. Well, Al-Hilal have got Neymar now, so that's gone a bit quiet, and it looks as though he kind of intimated he wasn't that interested in going to Saudi. And I think that's a great step for Napoli and great for Serie A if they're able to keep one of the world's best strikers.
I remember when João Cancelo, maybe this time last year, was thinking he might be one of the best full-backs in the world, but then Manchester City didn't want him 6 months later. Bayern Munich didn't want to sign him permanently. Who wants to sign him now?
Well, it looks like Barcelona, but it's going to have to be a loan with either an option to buy or an obligation down the track, because Barcelona are still very restricted in what they can do financially. They have been able to pull half of a lever to try and give themselves a bit of wriggle room. They announced a new deal last week about selling a portion of Barca Studios, and so they've been able to register a few of their new signings. They have got a bit of money from the Ousmane Dembele deal as well, him going to Paris Saint-Germain. So that gives them a bit of a freer hand. So that would make a lot of sense. They need cover in those positions. It would let them move Araujo to his more natural position at centre-back as well.
Did Cancelo struggle in Bundesliga?
He didn't play enough, I think is the bare truth of it. I think he assumed, and maybe we assumed, he was going to play almost every game. But actually, Alphonso Davies took a step up at left-back. You've got Pavard as an option at right-back. So he wasn't starting every game. I think he got annoyed about that, and that kind of made the situation worse. And then Nagelsmann went, Tuchel came in, and wasn't always a regular.
So that's a potential outgoing at Manchester City. What about Doku going to Manchester City?
So this is really interesting because we've known that he's a talent for quite a while. He is amazing on the ball, always looking to take people on, always looking to get into one-on-one situations. But he hasn't really delivered a consistent end product. But Pep Guardiola has clearly seen something in him that he thinks he can cultivate and thinks that raw material is something that can make Doku into a very good player. Bruno Genesio, the coach of Rennes, made it quite clear that there's interest in him, he's aware of that, and that Rennes might not be able to keep him.
But he's not somebody that you would be able to come in and be a polished starter. It would take patience and time for him to develop, and we know, we've seen with plenty of Manchester City signings, sometimes it takes a year for them to settle in. So I guess that would be the case for Doku, right?
He'd have to be patient, I think. But they've clearly seen something in his natural ability. And you look at him on the ball, I mean, he's so fun to watch. He's dynamic, and he did get some goals in Ligue 1 last season, but that's always been the allegation that, yes, it's all very pretty, but actually, does he affect the game enough? Pep Guardiola clearly thinks he can.
Dave wants to ask about Zaniolo to Aston Villa.
I bet. Exciting player. Went to Galatasaray, which caught us a bit by surprise. Won the Turkish Super League title. Scored some goals. But I think there was always a feeling that he might not be there for a long time. But the question with him is always, he's had 2 ACL injuries. So, and a young age as well. So there's always that fear. But he has shown real fortitude to battle back from that. As I say, he's won the Europa Conference League with Roma. He's won the Turkish Super League title. There is a talented player in there. There's an unusual player there because he's quite tall. He's quite rangy. There's a lot to like. And with Unai Emery, you always feel he can develop a player. So I think that would be a really smart move, actually.
And apparently Jude Bellingham was fairly quiet, Dave.
It's just remarkable. So he goes to San Mamés to make his La Liga debut for Real Madrid away at Athletic Club's not an easy place to go. It is loud there. Scores a goal, goes up to the Athletic Club fans, puts his arms out and says, how about that? So I think Real Madrid fans knew how good he was, but I think the overall vibe of him, the confidence of him, the leadership of him, I think that's even taken them by surprise. They love him already.
And there was always a fear of burnout because he's played so many games, both club and country. But I guess, is that the only worry about him at the moment? The only worry?
Yeah, because he's adapted straight away. And he's talking like a Real Madrid player already. And he's got that ability to play in different positions. They played him a bit higher up, I think, than some people expected. They feel he can get goals. He started to show that, scored in pre-season. He scored here in La Liga. So they've just tweaked the system a little bit to accommodate him. So I'll be fascinated to see how that plays out. But so far, so good.
Kevin, Kwaku, Olivia, Dave, thank you. Good morning. Transfers returns at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Transfer Talk is back at the normal time, which is midday. But don't worry, there's plenty more still to come today because the Transfer Show is here at 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. Next, we'll have the latest on Moises Caicedo's move to Chelsea from Brighton, and we'll tell you about Neymar heading to Saudi Arabia.